Hello, and welcome to Deep In Pact, a proud member of the Duff Network, where we dive deep into Arbo's most Canadian work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
That's me. And we're back to talk about Void 7.7. So, last chapter, Blake basically broke. And this chapter continues with Blake kind of coming to, kind of, not quite, not fully, but pulling the splinter of wood out of Laird's neck and kind of snapping back into his body a bit, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, still sort of at this point, he's kind of like a complete mess. Not like, I don't mean that in any sort of disparaging way. Like, considering what he just went through, it's an absolutely reasonable state that he's in. But he's like, he's frozen. He can't think. Like, he's just sort of completely stunned with everything that's just happened.
Yeah. And it obviously we were talking a lot last chapter about how kind of desperate it all felt. And that theme continues here. It's not, like Blake has just basically taken out Laird, but it's not a victory. It's grimy. It's like, it feels like an accident even.
Yeah. I definitely use the word accident. It was a reflex. Like he came out of that memory and he was panicking. Like we sort of mentioned, it was just like this brutal, instinctive sort of move. He didn't think about it really. Like as you mentioned last episode, he was almost narrating it as if someone else was doing it when it happened.
Yeah. Totally.
And he didn't want this. Like he made it very clear. He didn't want to kill Laird, and especially this is a particularly like violent, terrible, accidental way to do it. So it's not at all a victory.
Yeah. I mean, almost immediately Blake is like, "Oh fuck," and tries to help out. Actually, I want to pull out a quote, something that Conquest says, where he says, "You might want to step forward and help Mr. Bahame. Certain deals were made, and those deals are void if he passes," which is kind of spooky, right? We were talking last chapter about Laird having made deals for everyone's benefit except Blake's. And it seems like, though, Conquest is implying, hey, if Laird dies, actually it's not going to be better for you. It's going to be worse for everybody.
Which this line didn't really jump out to me so much on my first read-through, but the second read-through, you're sort of like, oh, wow, like Conquest is trying to help him or something, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think Conquest just likes pointing out what a bad job Blake is doing. So Blake kind of steps forward and tries to help Laird, but there are reasons that he can't. I kind of read it as there were some magical and some psychological reasons, but upon reread, I think you're right that it's just all psychological.
Yeah, because there's mention of like this feeling of his arm getting electrocuted, and I can see why you might have thought that there was some sort of barrier or something, but I think that's just the thought that Laird is bigger and stronger than him, just affecting him on a really physical level.
Well, yeah,
he just can't do anything. He's just
and Laird is just getting worse and worse. You kind of don't realize how bad it is to start, but then you realize like, oh fuck, Laird is like coughing up blood, and there's like blood everywhere, and it's just like not good.
Yeah, I sort of forgot how big this like little splinter thing was, I guess. Or maybe we never knew. I was thinking pretty small at first, and then the more this sort of goes on, I was Blake's really fucked
It's a hunk of wood.
I think the last thing I wanted to point out with all this is Laird kind of refuses Blake's help.
Yeah,
right?
It's interesting. He doesn't seem to want Blake to help him. He doesn't kind of help Blake help him, at least.
Yeah, and there is like, I mean, this could just be shock or something, like he has just been stabbed in the neck, and his eye is also messed up, which like Evan did that at the end of the chapter, but Blake hasn't really put those two things together because he's got his own shit to deal with. But like the way Laird just sort of stares at him. The lack of emotion read into it, I almost went, rather than shock, I went with Laird just being indignant, I guess is the word I want.
Which, I don't know, Laird, like, there's a time and a place for that.
I mean, he's got commitment, if nothing else.
Yeah, he's very zealous. So Conquest kind of knows that he has won here, right? And he says to Blake, look, if you want, I'll offer you a stay of execution. I won't kill you, but it will come at the cost of a favor, which obviously is immediately like, oh, fuck.
I mean, even without the ability to process what he's saying or speak, Blake still gives this a hard pass.
Yeah, it's definitely not on the table at all.
Yeah, instinctively, Blake just shakes his head. He's just like, nah, fuck that.
Yeah, correct move, Blake, I think. And Blake is kind of, he's inside his own head again, but he's still kind of struggling to get his bearing. He's like, he goes between kind of acting on autopilot, but also just kind of shutting down completely and kind of flips between these. Shaking, he kind of is desperate to act, but also he can't act. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of lead kind of being in a form of shock, I think that's sort of what Blake's going through here, like a massive case of psychological whiplash / shock / like everything. I want to call out this one bit Blake sort of narrates to himself where he says, "My instincts were telling me to go after Conquest, to throw myself at him in an effort to hurt him like I had Laird, to get rid of all the negative feelings, venting the outward pointed ones on Conquest, silencing the inward pointed ones by taking that bayonet to the chest or throat. It was the simplest, easiest way to make it all stop."
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, that's sort of how fundamentally, like, messed up Blake is after everything he's just been through. Is like, even his survival instinct, is at war with, like, just him wanting it to stop. Like, he's just paralyzed on every level.
Yeah, he's really pretty messed up. And he kind of attempts to kickstart his brain again by just kind of running through the reasons that he's fighting, thinking about all the reasons that keep him going, but none of them really work.
Yeah, and there's a cool, like, sort of ramping up of the tension as he's going through this list, because, like, intercut between various items on the list is just, like, things where, like, Evan is sort of freaking out because Conquest is approaching, or just details that Conquest is approaching.
Yeah.
So you sort of get this pressure as Blake is going through the list where you're like, come on, you got to find something.
Yeah. I want to touch on this because he kind of is thinking of, oh, why am I fighting? Oh, for my friends, for Rose, for Evan. And none of these work. And I don't know, that just kind of feels pretty bad. Like, it feels like a bad sign.
Yeah, well, so the list he sort of goes through is, firstly, he thinks he doesn't even want to fight, but he has to throw that away because that's just not an option.
Yeah.
Then he thinks about his friends, but he's done more harm to them than good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then he thinks about Molly, which I thought was higher than I would have expected. But, like, he also feels like he's kind of done enough to avenge her. I guess,
especially now that Laird has been fucking stabbed.
So there's really this sense of, like, he's kind of like, oh, I've done enough there, and so then he just starts to think about letting go again. So he has to, like, actively steer himself away. And then we get to Rose.
Yeah, so I pulled out a quote here where he says, "Rose, I didn't trust Rose," and he kind of just dismisses that one. And I think this is something that I want to talk about a bit later, where it seems like the trust between Blake and Rose is getting much worse, even though you kind of get the vibe from later on in the chapter that some stuff here is basically going according to plan. I mean, obviously there were some parts here that Blake would have not wanted to happen, but on a kind of grander level, this seems to have been what their plan was, and it works.
Yeah, no, you're right. They work together to succeed in this plan, seemingly. So
yeah,
it is a bit odd. And you're right. We'll have more to say on it later, I think.
Yeah.
But then after Rose, he just immediately is like, family? No. Like,
of course.
There's no decoration around it. He's just like, nah. And then, like, the thing that turns him is he thinks about the lawyers, and then he's like, oh, lawyers and death, and, like, I don't want to die because I'm going to hell. So that's sort of what motivates him, like, just this concept of not dying. And, like, as you're sort of saying, it's dark that the thing that turns him around is the lawyers, really. Like, that's not, it's not good.
He doesn't want to die, and that's enough.
I mean, I get that.
Yeah, you're right. But it does come from the lawyers, which I don't think is bad by itself, but I think it is kind of just feels like another slight slide down a little slope.
It's sort of the right thing for the wrong reasons is kind of what it feels like.
But eventually Blake finds that. He finds a reason to keep going. And from there he kind of goes back to what the plan seems to have been, which is get some of Laird's blood and just chuck it at Conquest. With the idea of Laird was captured by them and then freed, and so he kind of represents the idea of freedom, which obviously is the antithesis of Conquest.
Yeah, and so obviously this doesn't work, and I want to talk about why for a sec, because I think it's so cool, because like Conquest is sort of like, oh yes, this is a free man's blood, but it's also blood from a wound, so that's still conquering, and so, you know, he just steps over it.
Yeah.
But then we actually see later, Blake is able to reframe it, and it does work, so I love how cool the world of Pact is, where, like, everything you're doing is basically appealing to sets of spirits, and, like, they're really just, like, taking votes or something and being like, yeah, cool.
Yeah, we'll allow it, yeah.
It's just such a great and, like, flexible rule system for a fictional world. I think I've said this 100 times, but I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. Look, so I want to talk more about their plan, but I think we should do that at the end once we've covered the rest of the chapter. Just so we have everything out.
This is definitely the first taste you get of, so there is a plan.
Yes, thank God. So yeah, Blake chucks some blood at Conquest and it kind of doesn't work. And Conquest basically continues to attack Blake, kind of stabbing at him with his bayonet, shooting at him. And Evan kind of helps Blake barely avoid these shots.
Yeah, he does take one scrape to the shoulder, which, I'm worried he's going to get one of those, like, Frodo Baggins style wounds that never heals, like Aemon had with a ghoul, because we've obviously had some mentions of ghouls and how the wounds they give you never heal. And, I remember something being said about, like, Conquest's domain, when they first went there, and, you know, if that's just part of his aura, like, you know, maybe when he hits you with a weapon, it's not super easy to heal. Hopefully he hit mostly wax.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I hope. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. So Evan is kind of helping out during this, but I want to call out a line that Evan says, which is very telling. He says, Evan said, which is important because that's basically all that Evan says for the first, 3/4 of this chapter. He just keeps saying, and I didn't kind of catch it on my first read, but my second read around, I was like, oh wait, Evan just keeps saying, and it seems like he's really freaking out. He's really, like, struggling, I suppose.
Yeah, I pretty much had the same thing. I didn't really notice these lines. Like, I was sort of glazing over them each time. And then you brought it up, and you're right. Like, every time he has a line for quite a way through the chapter, it's just and at first I thought maybe I wasn't sure exactly what I was reading into it before noticing it, but you're right. Once you sort of focus in on it, it definitely has this sense of him just not being able to cope, and, like, that's all he can muster in terms of vocabulary. It's just
Yeah, but Evan does help Blake avoid some damage, and this kind of Blake kind of keeps escaping from Conquest until Blake basically snaps and just starts insulting Conquest, calling him out on all the stuff we've talked about. He's a Canadian incarnation of Conquest. What the hell? He's a pretender. He's fake, and basically just trying to, break through his strong front and reveal how weak he is underneath to everybody here, including the spirits.
Yeah, and I think he's just venting some anger out as well.
It's definitely a multi-purpose assault.
Yeah. The lead up to this is really great. Like, Conquest tells Blake to beg not to be killed, and, like, Blake sort of notices how weak he looks in the moment, and then he sort of thinks about how weak he actually is because of how unfair everything is that got him here, and that's just sort of what snaps him. He's just like, he just sort of enters, like, fuck it mode, and directs it all at Conquest, and it's quite satisfying to read, really.
It's so satisfying. I mean, it still feels desperate, but it's just like all the frustration that Blake has had. He finally gets a chance to vent it. He even calls Conquest small-dicked at one point, which I love. It's just like he just, like, flips out at him, which is awesome. It's very fun.
It captures some of the pettiness of the whole thing,
Which is perfect, because the way that, really the way to beat Conquest on an ideological front is kind of reduce him and prove how petty and weak he is. So Blake is running away from Conquest, slinging words at him, and basically Evan and Maggie help him avoid blows every so often, but eventually kind of just have to abandon him. And it's this continuation of Blake losing all of his resources, right? Everything just kind of taken away from him until finally Conquest swings his bayonet for a final blow, and Blake holds up the Stonehenge bracelet that he stole from Laird and kind of just says, "Stop!" And the bracelet is broken, and it releases all of its energy, which just pauses time for a few moments.
Yeah, I mean, this whole section is pretty badass, particularly that ending.
Yeah.
It's very theatrical. I love how sort of over the top it is almost, but it's packed, so that's part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't feel over the top because of it. But like, I even like the bit where like Blake dodges one attack and then Conquest goes to shoot him, and so Blake's way of dodging it is he just like lets himself lose balance and falls over.
It's like, not exactly the Matrix, but it'll do.
I was like, God, that's cool. Like, that he's sort of,
it's fun, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know why I like that so much, but I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then also, as you said, Maggie is around and she is healed apparently, which Blake notes was quite fast, and this is just glamour.
Interesting. Blake basically pulls out his final trick, and it works. He does some chronomancy, which is fun considering he's just killed Laird basically. But yeah, he's stalling. This doesn't solve his problem.
I mean, it's literally like stalling.
Oh yeah,
like what he's done is very literally stalling.
Yeah. So this time that he's bought, he gets over to Laird, but instead of helping him, he just takes more of his blood. Like, thanks, dude. And we kind of get these beats that Rose has been like knocked out by Conquest attacking her. And so Blake kind of realizes he needs Rose and gives blood to her to kind of, boot her back up.
Yeah, I mean, the image of Blake sort of running over and scooping up all this bloody snow into his jacket around Laird to nick his blood.
Take some of your blood.
Yeah, like it's simultaneously horrific but funny. Like I feel like a terrible person for saying it, but I did kind of laugh at the image of Blake just like, because he rolls Laird over too, which is like, he comments on how easy it is, and like this is also like brutal and like inhumane and also just kind of funny that he's just scooping up bloody stuff into his jacket and waddles off with it. Like,
yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So actually, I want to put out this line where Blake gives blood to Rose because I think it's interesting. Blake says, "I added, we need you as much as we needed Laird. This may be our last chance. Take as much as you need. I don't know if I trust you, but I trust you to do that much." Which again, is another bit of Blake not trusting Rose, which again, like, their plan is really coming together and being successful, but they just even so, they don't trust each other.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he needs to keep thinking and saying, like, explicitly that he doesn't trust Rose, makes me think that we're heading towards something bad between the two of them.
Yeah.
Because you're right, like, he's so sort of unnecessarily mentioning it almost every time she comes up.
Yeah.
I mean, the only other thing to point out here is Maggie cannot give Rose blood because of a lack of connection and also other reasons.
Yeah.
And then she stabs Blake to get the blood right near where he was stabbed by the fairy swordswoman, which is great symbolism. I mean, pointing out all these things is going to look really stupid when I'm like completely wrong about
You're really
this.
going all in on this theory, but whatever. It's your funeral. Anyway, so Conquest is closing the distance. Blake's out of tricks again. He's unfrozen. No more bracelet. But he's got one more trick, which is Pose is finally here. Rose has finished summoning Pose, and Pose climbs out of the book in Maggie's backpack, and Blake offers him freedom, complete freedom, in exchange for his help against Conquest.
You know that thing where, like, you get like 10-year-olds at school to write a letter to their 30-year-old self, and then you're meant to like read it when you're 30 and figure out if like you're proud of who you've become or whatever.
Yeah.
I think if like we got like a week ago Blake to write a letter to his future self, he'd already be pretty fucking disappointed, because stopping Pose was like one of the things he really hung his hat on as the trials were going on. He's like, well, I did a good thing in lower and capital G. And now he's just like, and now he's just given Pose away.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, like, as we sort of mentioned when he went to use him last chapter, he's become that corner diabolist. He's using the bad things because he has no more choices. Like, he's run out of options.
Yeah, he's very typical diabolist sliding down that slope, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about how this chapter is kind of messy, I think is the right word. Like, I don't think it's unintentional. I think it's intentional, I think there's definitely a sense of it being hard to follow parts of this chapter. Like, there's a part where Blake and Maggie are hiding inside this circle of Lead's blood, which kind of is there and kind of comes out of nowhere and then is they're out of it a few chapters later. And it's like, it feels like it could use a few more sentences to set it up. But obviously Blake is still in a really bad place. So the kind of messiness, and obviously this is an intense situation. So the messiness of this chapter obviously is pretty justified. I don't know. I'm not sure if I don't know if I like it as a device in this chapter or not.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It definitely feels like this fight just is messy and Blake just is a mess. So yeah, it kind of makes sense that like the whole thing's just such a scramble. Things aren't really being processed as well as they like would be in better circumstances. Like this was definitely one of those chapters where I'm really glad that we're doing the story this way and I get to read the chapters twice, because the second read through this chapter was so much more clear to me than the first.
Yeah, totally. I think this is the perfect story for that, because there's so much stuff. I feel like, I guess we've talked about this a lot over the course of the whole show, but there's so much stuff where, due to the literary nature of it, rereading it and reading it a few times really makes you catch all of these great things. Anyway,
yeah.
I think also this was Wildbow's Month from Hell. I think this was the one that there was all this like stuff going on that led to him like having to not spend as much time writing the chapters as normal or something. I'm not 100% sure of the details, but
yeah, no, I think he has sort of mentioned to us that it was around here somewhere.
Yeah.
That like he was sort of going straight from finishing one chapter to writing the next one, like in the same sitting, which is something he's never done outside of this area, because it was just, a lot of real life stuff kind of being dumped on him all at once.
Yeah.
But like, so yeah, I don't know, like it's still pretty good. Like,
it still works. Like I think it works as a choice, and I don't think it affects us badly because we are reading the chapter multiple times. I don't know. It just feels, it's interesting to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the fight continues. Poos agrees, and he kind of comes out and just starts fucking with Conquest, doing some damage, but unfortunately Evan is taking damage. He gets knocked out. Maggie has to abandon Blake, and Conquest scares off Poos and approaches Blake, and Blake surrenders.
And all hope is lost.
Yeah. I like this. I think we're going to talk about this a bit, because Blake says to Conquest, "You've beat me." He gives up, I mean, it seems like he's given up. But there's a trick here. Blake and the Cabal are playing a trick on Conquest and on us, the spirits, the audience. And I like it. I think it's good.
Yeah, so I'm very conflicted about where I come down on it, because I do really like the sort of big twist moment where you're like, oh, like it's all, this was a plan and it's worked, and
yeah,
and that is a sort of very satisfying moment. But there was so much that sort of confused me leading up to this, and like I sort of talked about how it seemed like Blake didn't have a plan. And I do feel like there was maybe some narration gymnastics to keep us in the dark there, which I think maybe are also part of why some bits of this chapter weren't super clear the first time. So, yeah, I don't know, because I did really like the reveal, but I'm not 100% sure if I think some of the confusion beforehand was maybe worth the payoff, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, okay. I just really like clever wording tricks. So Blake says to Conquest, "You've bested me. I won't move 10 paces from here until this is decided," and basically throws Rose under the bus. And it's like, it really feels like we've had the Blake and Rose conflict being set up. And it feels like it's like, oh yeah, this is actually happening. But obviously part of this, at least, is a trick. It's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're right. All that stuff setting up Blake not trusting Rose delivers for us a little bit right here and now. And I agree, that wording where he won't move 10 paces until it's decided on the second read through is like, oh, nice.
Yeah, it's good. So yeah, things have come to a head. Blake basically says, "I surrender, but you probably need to get Rose to surrender too." And Conquest is like, "All right, And Conquest basically attacks Rose, lunging into the mirror dimension, and reflections start to shatter as they kind of battle, as it were. And as this is going on, Pose approaches Blake to kind of extract revenge from him.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
Maybe we should keep going with the summary and we'll kind of loop back around when it's all, once it's all resolved.
Yeah, I think the one thing I do want to pull out of here is how Blake like bluffs Pose to get him to piss off.
Yeah.
And I love, again, it's a bit of a triumphant moment where Blake just has to pull out all his remaining bullshit cards and just act really confident. And I think he does a pretty good job. His prose is very convincing. And I mean, it works. Like Pose is just like, oh, fuck this. Like, I'm sick of these people. I'm out.
The other thing I really like about this is, up until Pose enters the scene, we kind of feel like Blake has lost, right? But Pose comes in and Pose is like, oh, nice, you've done it, or whatever. He's like, Pose kind of gets what's going on a bit.
Yeah.
And then is like, but I could fuck it up for you right now because you can't move. And it's like, wait, what? What is Pose talking about? Like, Blake has lost here. What's going on? I just think it's like, it's a great way of not doing the reveal so quickly that it kind of doesn't make sense, but also kind of keeping us invested and curious, because obviously Blake hasn't lost yet because something weird is going on.
Yeah, I agree.
So Blake bluffs Pose, scares him off for now, and Corvidae comes back with a small mirror, puts it into the circle, and that's it. The mirrors are all broken, and there's no other way for Conquest to get out except for this mirror, which has been put inside this circle. The mirror stuck inside, in the middle of the circle I'd drawn. The blood of a free man, layered. The circle would be lined with Rose's hair, hacked off, caught by Conquest, freed by myself. Maggie had torn out the pages of Black Lamb's blood, weighing them down so they wouldn't fly away. I couldn't afford to lose them. The pages that had bound an other, now free, thrice bound. And so this circle of freedom has, ironically, bound Conquest.
Unless the eye shows up or something, but there is a very much a sense of they've done it. So I don't think that's going to happen right away, at least.
Yeah.
Also, we did sort of skip over. Conquest did confirm at one point that Laird is dead.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it seems fairly conclusive based on that, which Well, I mean, that also means there'll be some angry Behames around.
Well, yeah, there are a bunch of Behames still inside that house, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's still a lot going on, even with Conquest out of the picture, maybe. But, yeah. Whew.
Yeah. So let's talk about their plan. So,
okay.
What... the question that we're going to pose here, I think, is how much of this was planned? So, getting Laird's blood, part of the plan, right? Rose clearly broke a lot of mirrors to take away any escape that wasn't inside the circle. Makes sense. Corvidae went to get a mirror. That all kind of was obviously part of the plan. Summoning Pose and cutting off Rose's hair was like probably part of the plan. I wonder how much of this was improv paying off and how much was actually pre-planned stuff.
I assume the Rose's hair thing was pre-planned, especially because they had to get it out of the mirror world and onto the circle. The Pose thing does... I mean, they needed a triple, so it seems like they must have had a plan to get Pose or his pages involved. But, well, no, that would never work unless they're going to set him free. So,
right? Unless they were planning to set the hyena free instead?
Unless like Pose was like the backup and they were hoping something better would come along. It definitely feels like that one was their sort of we can do this one if we need to.
Yeah.
Laird's blood was clearly part of it. I
mean, I don't think they wanted to kill him, but yeah, they definitely wanted to get some blood from him.
They needed a bit of blood, and they needed to take it, I think.
Then the question kind of remains, like, if this did go so according to plan, why is Blake so upset at how Rose... Like, why is Blake so upset at Rose here? Like, what has Rose done to lose his trust?
Well, so I think, first of all, like, sort of, this went to plan in the sense of there was a final idea for Conquest in the mirror inside the circle.
So obviously...
And everything around there was complete improvisation.
It's pretty obvious that Blake didn't want to relive his worst moments at the very least.
But I do agree that the Rose Blake stuff seems to go beyond this plan, because otherwise there was no need for him to keep thinking that stuff to himself.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think I just wanted to end at the final two lines of the chapter are Blake sort of sits down after Conquest is stuck in the circle, and he goes, "We did it, Evan."
He kind of falls down.
Flops. And he says, "We did it, Evan." And Evan just goes, "Woo." And like it says "woo." He mumbled.
Yeah.
And I think that just sort of so perfectly sums up this victory. Which is like, we're so beaten, but we did it. Like it took literally everything.
Yeah, it took a lot. It took a lot out of them. But Conquest is bound, and the contest is maybe over, or not. I mean,
tune in to find out, I guess.
Because the contest ended when Conquest or Blake died, or Conquest or Blake gave up, right? And I don't think that's happened.
Well, he's not going to give up anytime soon either. Like Conquest seems like the kind of guy who'd sit in the mirror for 100 years before giving up.
Yeah, so who knows? Who knows what's going to happen next? I guess we'll find out next episode.
Yes.
But before the next episode, I wanted to do a bit of a monster corner, one that I've been kind of cooking up for a while. I wanted to talk about the terracotta soldiers, which are the dolls from the Sisters of the Torch have, right? Because I think this is very interesting as basically what I would sum them up as is, they don't have a perfect match in kind of historic monster lore, but they are a pretty good modernization of something like a golem, or maybe like an elemental. They have a bit of an elemental kick.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, or just sort of creepy evil mannequins.
Yeah.
Are a bit of a thing, even in just stuff like Doctor Who. Like they sort of fit that motif of Uncanny Valley monsters, I guess.
Yes, totally. But I wanted to dive into golems here, because I think golems are, the closest analog to what one of these, terracotta soldiers is, basically. So golems are from early Judaism, where they were created from, mud or clay, or sometimes like flesh, like zombie styles. And because of that, they always have a bit of like an earthy flair, and so golems in kind of modern mythology has definitely become a lot more rocky or earthy than any other kind of element, right? So in Dungeons and Dragons, they're clay, flesh, iron, or stone. There's kind of metal golems that seem very common, but other elements are starting to become more common, right? So we've got fire golems, water golems, a kind of like rock monster with a elemental spirit mixed in.
Okay.
So, terracotta soldiers make sense as a pactified adaptation of a traditional golem, where you take some husk, a kind of plastic as the modern metal husk, and imbue it with some kind of elemental flair, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, well, that makes sense, obviously, because the sisters are completely based around their fire elemental.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, and especially, I think Pact talked a bit about when the dolls showed up, about how plastic was replacing wood as one of the 5 elements of Pact. So I like this.
The thing I love about it is it works so perfectly for the sisters as well, because the sisters are like this very much a blend of traditional practitioning, where they have kind of a like old school cabal, but it's got that modern twist where it's a sorority, like they're the perfect blend of an old school coven, or whatever you want to call it, and like modernizing that with sorority vibes, and they're all kind of modern high-powered businesswomen.
Yeah, you're right. It's it does suit them. Like it's this sort of modern twisted version of the classic, which is sort of what they are.
Exactly. So the efficient, the modern businesswoman efficient version of making a mud person is taking a mannequin or a doll and kind of turning them into a modern version of a golem, right? I love it. It's just like a perfect tool for them, because it's this perfect blend of old school, very, very old school, like mythology for servants, but with this weird modern plasticky twist, which I think is great. So yeah, that's my little ramble about how the terracotta soldiers are a great modern adaptation of golems.
Yeah, that was cool.
But that's the end of our discussion on 7.7. Our next episode, 7.8, will be out on Friday the 21st of June.
Yes, but if you cannot wait that long, head over to doofmedia.com, and there are a bunch of other shows there for you to check out, and I guarantee you won't be wanting for content if you get into the rest of the Doof network.
But let's say you've listened to all the podcasts and you still aren't satisfied with the discussion around Wildbow stories or media in general. Where can people go if they want to discuss these things more, Elliot?
I don't know if you're trying to lead me into the discussion thread in the show notes below.
Oh, maybe.
Or becoming a Doof patron and you get access to the Doof Discord.
Why not both? I was going for the Patreon. So if you go to patreon.com/doofmedia and sign up to support the network, in addition to just supporting the content that you hopefully are enjoying, you'll get access to the Doof Discord, where a lot of awesome discussions on all kinds of crazy topics goes. So we've been talking about Marble Olympics a lot recently. That obviously has just ended a week ago.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, we get our time back. And, you don't have to experience the horror of the Oceanics run anymore.
I'm just glad the 2019 Marble Olympics are over. Not the general concept of Marble Olympics, just these ones specifically.
There's a lot of movie discussion, a lot of Wildbow content discussion in there. So if you just can't get enough of talking about these Wildbow stories on the Doof Media Network, then head to the Patreon and you get all kinds of additional fun things.
Yes, and as we mentioned a bit earlier in this chapter, Wildbow gives us these chapters, rain, hail, or shine.
Yes.
And he's entirely backed by his patrons at patreon.com/Wildbow. So if you have any extra money you can spare, he puts in so much effort and he really deserves a reward for it.
Yeah, and if you don't have money, that's okay too. Other things you can do to help are things like voting for the stories on Top Web Fiction, or even just shoot Wildbow a kind word. I'm sure he would love to hear it. What else have we got? Oh yeah, so also, if even that isn't enough discussion for you, the place for you to go is our discussion threads where we talk about the chapters. So we'll have a discussion thread for 7.7, and we'll be in there kind of talking about this chapter in even more depth with all of you listening. So head over today. It'll be linked in the show notes down below.
Apart from that, we'll see you on Friday the 21st.
See you then.
7.8.
Bye.